Hey guys, it's the midweek uplift. It is that time that I love so much. The time that I get to bring you some good news, words of encouragement, and challenge you to be a better version of yourself. So, guys, we have started on this new series where we are looking at some real issues that are affecting our lives, especially in this time that we are going through. We realize that because of the coronavirus pandemic, most of us have gone through some events that have left us feeling so stressed. Some have experienced depression, and some of us are even anxious about the future. So we decided to look at stress, anxiety, and depression so that we can gain deeper understanding of these three and how we can manage them in our lives. So for the sake of just recapping on what we covered in our first episode, we looked at how these three are different, and I did that by describing them using time frames. We looked at how depression looks at the past, extract the negativity and project it into the future. We also looked at stress as how we respond to the current stresses or things that are overwhelming us in the present. We also looked at anxiety as, how we respond to how things could go wrong in the future. So those are the differences that we sort of looked at. Having looked at the differences and now we know what they are, I wanted us to focus on stress today. And why I chose to focus on stress today or start with stress is because stress is the most common one of these three. I realized that stress is something that we experience at some point in our lives if it's not on a daily basis. Stress affects the children, it affects the older, the younger, it affects the rich, the poor, you name it. Everyone experiences stress at some point. And so for that reason, I thought, it's important that we start on that level. So what is stress then? How do we define stress? Stress is defined differently by different people and on different platforms. I'm going to go with this particular definition, which I really identified with. So stress is defined as physiological or psychological response to an ongoing situation that feels uncontrollable, too big, or too overwhelming. So in other words, it's how our minds and our bodies respond to an ongoing situation, something that is happening in the present. So now that we have defined stress, how then does it look like in our lives? There's so many signs and effects of stress, and I'm going to be sharing a few of them with you today. In most cases, stress will present itself as, headaches. Sometimes we experience pain in our tummies. Sometimes we lose sleep. We can't sleep. No matter how tired we are, we just can't shut down. For some people, it can be lack of motivation or lack of focus. We can't focus on activities that we're trying to do. Some people experience anger, or they just, burst in anger for no reason, for no particular justification. And so other people as well, they present as, socially withdrawn. They avoid socializing with other people. So those are some of the effects or signs of stress. Now that we have defined it, we know that it affects everyone, and we know how it presents itself in our lives. I want to go to the meat of this session where I am sharing with you how then can we manage stress? How can we deal with stress when it's happening in our lives? I feel like the starting point has to be identifying what is stressing us and acknowledging that we are stressed. Listen, you cannot deal with something that you haven't identified. You can't solve a problem that you have not identified. And most importantly, we have to acknowledge that we have got a problem for us to do something about it. And so the starting point has to be identifying areas that are stressing us. I'll give an example of myself. I've just shared with you that stress is something that everyone experiences. In my own experience, during this pandemic, during the first or the second lockdown, where we had to work from home and homeschool at the same time, I found myself feeling really stressed because I was trying to balance work life, home life, homeschooling the children, and just family in general, ministry as well. So there was a lot going on. I was trying to balance everything. I was starting to feel overwhelmed. And so I experienced stress that way. What did I do? I took some time just to identify in my work area and at home, things that I needed to adjust so that I could manage well. And so as for you, I don't know what is stressing you at the moment, but it pays for you just to take a pause, to look around in your life, to identify the areas that are causing you stress. And like I said, acknowledge that you have stress issues so that you can start to do something about it. Another way of managing stress: learn to say no or not now. This one is a big one. I am still learning to do this. I realize that as people of African origin or Christians, we find this really difficult. We feel like saying no is rude or is mean, or we're not being considerate, or we are less godly or less Christian. But I'm here to encourage you that it's okay to say no. As long as you have evaluated your situation, you know what you can handle and you know what you cannot handle. It's okay to say, hey, I need a little bit more time. Can you come back to me later with the same request? So you are responsible for what you take and put on your plate, because you know what is on your plate already. Don't put that responsibility on other people. It's your responsibility. Listen, I was saying it's not even less godly or less Christian. I'm reminded of Jesus himself. At some point, he was invited to go to Lazarus because he was sick. You know what Jesus did? He delayed for 2 days. He did not just drop everything down and run to Lazarus. This is something that he had to do because he knew what he had to deal with at that particular time. Same for you. You don't have to drop everything down just to fit into each and every other person's demands in your life. Look after yourself. Learn to say no or later. It's okay. The next thing that I need to share with you that you need to do in order for you to manage stress is plan your rest and self-care. Listen, most people think that being on the go all the time, just working means that we are being productive. But what I've realized is, if we don't prioritize our rest and self-care, we are going to break down at some point, and we are not even able to perform as well as we think we can or we ought to do. And so I want to encourage you, whatever you are doing, as much as you're prioritizing your work, your calling, take some time out just to look after yourself, just to self-care, and rest. I was giving you an example of myself, how I got stressed during the pandemic. One of the things that I had to do was I planned my annual leave in advance, making sure that I don't wait until I feel like I'm breaking down or I'm burnt out for me to take some time off. I planned it well in advance so that I could have some rest regularly. You can do the same. Look around in your life. When can you take breaks and do it intentionally well in advance? The next thing is bring it to Jesus. This one is the main one for me. Listen, there's nothing that is too big or too small for Jesus, for him to help us to handle in life. Jesus is real. Jesus is there and he is caring. He cares about every detail about our lives. He wants to know what we're going through, and he wants to be part of everything that we're going through. And so I want to encourage you that when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're trying to handle everything by yourself and you feel like you can't do it all by yourself, it's okay. Jesus has given us an open invitation. I love it. Matthew 11 verse 28 to 29. He says that, are you weary? Are you carrying a heavy burden? Come to me. Come to me and you will find refreshment and rest in me. Listen, there is an open invitation. There is a place that we can go to when we are feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling like we want to give up, we can't carry on, when we're too stressed. Jesus is saying, come, I will give you refreshment. I will give you rest. I will take your stress away. And so stop suffering on your own. There is help out there through the people around us, through Jesus himself. And so I feel like, this is what I intended to share on stress, and I'm hoping that you have found it encouraging and helpful. I'm going to be sharing more about depression in our next episode, and I'm looking forward to having you joining me. So don't miss the next episode. And until then, guys, remain positive, speak out when you need help, know that stress can be managed, and hey, stay encouraged. Take care.